quite sure how Nathan was hearing you unless he's got you on something else. So.
Are you're on the conference call number, aren't you, Nathan?
I have that.
Oh,
I'm guessing he can't hear you now.
You may have
Tell me
heard
when
your,
we're I don't.
we're starting right
It's
now.
9 o'clock. Okay, good morning. It's Monday, June 8th, 2020, 9 a.m. This is the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Santos.
Second.
Second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, you heard Nathan there? Okay, we have Nathan joining us via conference call, or the phone. Okay, item number 3 is a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the FY 1920 Muscatine County budget. So we are now in a public hearing. Sherry, did you want to give us a brief overview on that?
I will. You have the detail sheet that was in your packet. Excuse me, I'll just go over it briefly. We have, for the sheriff, some grant.
I'm sorry, Sherry, could you?
I'm sorry?
What's that, Nathan?
If she could move a little closer.
To the speakerphone. To here?
Maybe put it.
Just a minute. Bill's gonna put it out in the center of the room.
You need to yell.
Use your big girl voice.
Now, wait a
Okay,
minute.
You still tell her.
can you hear me now, Nathan?
Nathan?
Hello?
Nathan, are
That's better, thank you.
Okay, all right. We had some additional HIDA grant money that we're amending the expenditures and the revenues for that. At the jail, we have increased revenue from inmate reimbursements. The county attorney, we have additional fine collection dollars over what was budgeted. Then we have a number of things that are related to COVID-19. The medical examiner, some additional expenses, plus their autopsy and lab fees. We don't know what the correlation is there, but that was in danger of going over budget. Funeral expense for general assistance. We also increased revenues for the trust fees in the general fund. When we made that switch, we hadn't adjusted that because we didn't know what that was gonna look like, but we're looking at least $23,000 in additional revenue to the general fund. Board of Health, that is the allocation that the board approved for the public health department for COVID-19, plus some revenue that was increased. Magic operations, for some reason, the amount we had budgeted was a little under what they were actually billing us for quarterly, so we're adjusting that. The auditor has some adjustment for her COVID grant and some election supplies, I think postage and with that last election, the absentee count was higher than she would have expected when she put this budget together.
really?
Yeah. And $25,000 for admin building and maintenance and repair. The bulk of that is HVAC system repairs. So, in a nutshell, in the general fund, which is our main operating fund, we are amending $236,900 for expenditures, $753,664 for revenue, adding $516,764 to the fund balance. So, with everything going on, we're in pretty good shape.
Okay.
Any questions?
Have we seen funding requests on that public health dollars? You're starting to see
Yes.
those and that process is flowing?
Yes, we've paid one, they're sending them to us monthly. We paid one and then we have one in the queue, I think, to be paid. So, yes, they're sending us the detail we requested and we're not having any issues.
And on the medical examiner expenses, are those typically significant lag, or do we have any kind of a
For the
idea?
autopsy,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, there could be a significant lag. And they were purchasing some additional protective gear too.
And on those autopsy expenditures, do those just hit within the fiscal year that they happened, or do we have, so is that something we maybe happen to look at having stuff drag on, or?
It's very possible that we'll get bills after July 1 that were incurred in this fiscal year. That happens frequently. It's one of those things when we budget, we try to guess based on history what we think we're gonna have, and that's difficult.
Right.
So it's unusual for us not to amend the medical exam
Okay.
budget in a fiscal year.
Okay, I don't have any board members have any questions?
The building and maintenance, repairs, you mentioned that was just all HVAC. We don't have anything, I noticed on all the other ones, we do have some sort of a COVID line item adjustment. For everything that we're doing in regards to the departments, we don't have anything that's coming under maintenance and administration.
We're not paying that out of the maintenance budget. The
Okay.
acrylic shields, we're paying out of a non-departmental line because it's building-wide, it's not specific by department, so.
Okay.
And the expense hasn't been tremendous, really. We had masks donated, we paid for, I think, 100 masks, but that ended up being $300, they were $300 a mask, and, the acrylic shields, I believe for the recorder's office to cover her window, it's $836 for her window, so compared to what was initially discussed with building in barriers, this is a much less expensive solution. And seems to be, they seem to be working. There was some concern about whether they would stay standing up, but I don't think there's an issue there, so.
And when it comes to the courthouse budget, is that gonna be then just out of the attorney's budget when they come in to do those repairs or those installations for
Those
what
will
they
be
need?
paid for by the state of Iowa, those aren't county expenses.
Okay,
So all of their hand sanitizer and all that is a state expense. The county houses them, they pay for their own materials, computers and all that, so.
We just provide the facility,
We
correct?
provide the facility and janitorial services and maintenance on the building, but that is.
for those items, okay,
Yeah, that's
Good.
covered by the state.
all right.
Okay, Nathan, do you have any questions?
No, you guys covered it, thank you.
Okay, I don't know if we have any members of the public on the, do we have any call-in members from the public that would have any questions or comments?
We have 2 on there right now.
We see we have 2 in addition to Nathan.
2 callers that I'm not sure who they are.
We don't know who they are. If they have questions or comments on the, we are in a public hearing. So hearing none, I would accept a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close.
I have a motion by Santos to close the public hearing, a second by Doug. This would be a roll call vote. Santos?
Aye.
Doug? Scott?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Public hearing is now closed. Item number 3A is Resolution 0608-2001, amending the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. Do we have a?
I'll move to approve.
I have motion, okay, so I have a motion by Santos and I'll call that a second, Nathan, is that good?
Yeah.
A second by Nathan. This is a roll call, any discussion? This is a roll call vote, Santos,
Aye.
Nathan,
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Item 3B is Resolution 0608-2002, the FY 1920 budget appropriations.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Doug. Any discussion? This is a roll call vote. Scott?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
Santos?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Item number 4, that might be who's on this, the review of the amended 2080 agreement for the Eastern Iowa Mental Health and Disability Services with the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region CEO Lori Elam. And then there will be a discussion of possible action to, we'll talk about the 2080 first. Lori, is Lori on the line?
Yes, I am. Thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, Lori. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. The amended 2080 agreement was reviewed, and had been sent out to all 5 counties. And then we had a, governing board meeting with all 5, counties, their supervisors as well. And I think everybody had an opportunity to ask questions and get answers, and we had a really good discussion about several points. I'm going to highlight some of the changes and explain why they were put in. The main reason this 2080 agreement is being amended is because of the Children's Behavioral Health bill that was passed in May of 19, House File 690. So the regions, starting July 1, will be providing access and information and referral and ensuring that services are available to children with a diagnosis of serious emotional disorders. So with that, I'm just going to touch on the page numbers and point out where the changes are at. On the first page, we have added under purpose and goals, we had to add in the behavioral health services for children. So this 28E, it provides local access for mental health and disability services for adults, and then now behavioral health services for children. On page 2, we had a great discussion about the governance, and under 4.0 letter A, the board agreed to adding language that each member county shall appoint one of its supervisors to serve as a director on the governing board, as well as an alternate who would fill in during an absence. And this has been a topic of discussion for a few years, so I'm glad that we were able to get that in the language now. 4.0 continues on page 3, and it lists all of the new board members. Some of them are voting members and some are not, but we have on the governing board, there will be one adult person who utilizes services or is an active relative of such a person. We have one individual representing adult service providers. So those 2 positions we had on our board as of when we started as a region. They have been ex officio members, but now the adult person or an active relative of a person will become a voting member. The service providers, both the adult and the children, are ex officio starting July 1. The other 3 people who will be on the governing board is an individual representing the Children's Behavioral Health Service provider, and another individual is going to be on the board representing the education system. And then we have a person who's a parent of a child receiving behavioral health services or an active relative of such child. So the makeup of our board is changing, is gaining 3 more positions. On page 4, the voting procedures, 4.2, the regional governing board decided to use a weighted vote process at the board meeting. We do have a few regions who are continuing to battle with DHS and also have now gone to the Attorney General for an opinion regarding the voting for financial matters or voting on financial matters. Their governing board feels that the elected officials should be the only one voting on financial matters. DHS cited code where it says the members on the governing board have the authority to vote. It doesn't distinguish between financial issues or other issues. So DHS did suggest to several regions that if they wanted to use a weighted vote process, we could do that. So I'm kind of watching to see what happens with these other two regions and what comes out of the Attorney General's office. On page 5, we have the board officers. And so the change there is that at the first meeting of each calendar year, the governing board will elect a chair, vice chair, and secretary to serve for the new calendar year. On page 6, under 4.6, A and B, we have our Adult Advisory Committee and our Children's Advisory Committee. Part of House File 690 specifies who needs to be on the Children's Advisory Committee. There are 9 members, and then we also have one of the governing board members, Jack Lilly from Jackson County, will be serving on the advisory committee, not only for the adult committee, but also for the children. And our Children's Advisory Committee, we have our first meeting on June 23rd, and kind of a meet and greet and talk about what the individuals do and where do they see the gaps. And then we will talk at length about House File 690 as it breaks down the services and what we're responsible for ensuring access both in FY 20 and FY 21, 21 and 22, I'm sorry. On page 7, 4.7, methods for dispute resolution. This also brought a lot of good discussions, and the governing board, if they want to use a pure dispute process, we are going to be writing a policy for that. I've been researching and have several documents about peer support and the peer dispute reference and process and peer review. And so we'll be putting together a policy, and I will bring that before the governing board, and may end up bringing that back to all 5 counties as well, just because, it's talking about internal disputes between the governing board and or any member county. So we'll be sharing that with everybody. On page 8, under 5.0, we added a statement about attending an annual all-member county board of supervisor meeting, preferably to be held in the second quarter of the fiscal year. I think our meeting that we had in May went very well. Despite being on Zoom or WebEx, sometimes it's really hard to get the interaction and get people to ask questions when we're not all in the same room. So hopefully we won't have to do this too much longer, but when we roll around to the fall, we'll have another all-member county meeting, and we'll be able to see, everybody face to face. And that, I believe, are the highlights. We did talk on page 12, there is the language about transfer dollars and budgeting transfer dollars and what those dollars are used for in terms of our budget. So the transfer dollars pay for crisis services as well as administrative costs, and then they're also there in case a county runs short in terms of revenue that can be used to help support that county till it gets to the new fiscal year. So with that, does anybody have any questions?
I have a few questions. Lori, this is Santos Acedo. With your new board, that your appointment, for adding adults and children, parents, how many board members is that gonna be in total that you'll have added in as the overall new board?
The governing board will gain 3 new members. One will be a children's behavioral health service provider, one will represent the education system, and one will be a parent of a child. The advisory board is gaining, the children's advisory board is going to be brand new, and so the committee members include parents of children who are utilizing services, a member of the education system, early childhood advocate, child welfare advocate, a children's behavioral health service provider, a member of the juvenile court, a pediatrician, a child care provider, local law enforcement representative, and then regional governing board member, and Jeff Willie has offered to fill that spot.
So,
So those are the basics for the advisory committee. Does
and,
that answer your question?
yeah, it does partly, and when you're doing that, I read in 4.6 where it talks about how that's gonna be appointed by the Eastern Iowa Governing Board. How do we, as a Muscatine County, community, make sure that we have the diversity on that board, sharing that it is not just parents from the Quad Cities or from Clinton, for example? How do we make sure that board gonna be inclusive in regards to making sure that we are included in regards to that board membership as well too, from the advisory board to the actual governing board as well too? So it's not just having that, so how do we clarify that? Because that's not in there, it just says that it's appointed by them, so it's not just let's say that the police officer that you're adding on to there isn't just from Scott County, or isn't just from Clinton. How are you doing that?
Yeah, I understand your question now. We had a Zoom meeting back in April where we had over 65 individuals from all of the different areas involving children, and we reviewed the bill, we talked about that, we talked about the advisory committee and governing board, and then we talked a lot about our crisis services and how they're being utilized by children already. And then we asked for volunteers for individuals who wanted to serve on our committee. And I've created a list, and we specifically made sure that all 5 counties are represented. You mentioned the law enforcement, and we had a law enforcement officer from Durant, but then they had to back out at the last minute. But now we have I want to say it's the police chief from Tipton serving on the advisory committee. I will send out the list to the governing board members, and that way, Jeff, you can send it out to all of your board members so they can see that we do have representation not only from Cedar, Muscatine, Clinton, and Jackson, as well as Scott. We kind of doubled up on some of the positions too. That way, we made sure we had representation from all 5 counties, not just the bigger counties or, Clinton, Scott, and Muscatine. We try to include all 5.
And
I'm going to send that now, so you can see that.
Okay, and that's good, Lori. I'm just saying for future board memberships, a lot of times, for examples, in the county, we're requested to constantly have some sort of a balance of some sort, and it's not just a gender balance, but we want to make sure that they're, in this case, it could be just identifying, making sure that we do have a 5 county balance, or maybe a good diversification of across the counties is all I was just wanting to make sure. So maybe in 2 years from now, it's not just, well, we dropped a few members and sort of they're now all just members from Scott County. I just want to make sure that as that continues, that's
Yeah,
that's
and I
an
think
effort.
Santos, I think that, and maybe Lori, I think it's true that, you know, these advisory board committee memberships, we're asking volunteers to do a lot of work here. And we have had on the adult side, if I'm not mistaken, Lori, it's been a bit of a challenge to even get volunteers because of the time commitments they must make. And so that kind of has played a bit of a role in all of this as well. Fair statement, Lori?
Well, I will tell you, yeah, Jeff, you're totally right, is asking people to volunteer their time, and many of these individuals are working a full-time job, and they don't get paid for serving on these committees. But I just did a quick count on the number of individuals who are from Muscatine, work in Muscatine, in that area, and there were 6 out of the 12 members. So we do have a good representation from all counties. So just sharing that with you real quick.
Okay.
And Jeff, I'm forwarding that spreadsheet to you right now.
Okay, thanks, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. That's all I had.
Sure.
Nathan, Doug, Scott, anybody have other questions for Lori?
This is Nathan. I do have a couple.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Okay, I'll try to speak up since I imagine it's difficult to hear, but, and Laura, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I think there's been a lot of excellent changes. I just have a few questions, mainly about clarification and just some suggestions. With regard to section 4.0 B through F on page 3, each one of those, as I read them, makes reappointment of each of those directors obligatory. In other words, the board doesn't have any choice if that director wants to serve again. And I don't anticipate necessarily any problems with that, but I always suggest not tying the board's hands. You know, we've seen difficulty where the governing board has been obligated by the 2080 to appoint or elect anybody to anything. So I would suggest removing that obligatory provision in 4.0 B through F.
Vincent, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The problem is, we had to change one word according to DHS. You see in each section where it says, with such appointment effective upon confirmation by the governing board.
Yes.
We have the word approval, and DHS says the governing board does not have the authority to approve members from the advisory committee to the governing board. And so I asked, can we use the word confirmation? And they said yes. They are tying our hands, once again, and maybe this will change as, you know, we get next year into legislation regarding the children's bill and all of the requirements that came with it. And I do have that, I have your concern documented, so we will share it.
Sure. Sure. Who then approves or nominates the individuals for B through F?
That would be the Children's Advisory Committee. So when they meet on the 23rd with all of the management teams, we will be talking about the representatives we need on governing board. And so they will be making those recommendations, and then I will take them to the governing board for confirmation.
So I guess 2 questions arise out of that. Number one, is the board simply then a rubber stamp that has to approve every single nomination by the Children's Advisory Committee?
It does appear so, yes.
Okay, and the other thing is, does that only apply to individuals appointed by the Children's Advisory Committee? I mean, looking at 4.0C and 4.0B, those would be individuals appointed by the Adult Advisory Committee. Are they also rubber stamped by the committee in an obligatory way? Or by the board?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, another question on 4.2, page 4, just a simple clarification here. The quorum shall be 2/3 of all directors. Does that mean director by vote or director by body?
I took that as director by body, but we do have the clause right below that that says we can have in the electronic meeting, we've been having electronic meetings now for, 2 months, 3 months.
Sure.
So, I guess it's more of, are they present and can hear and contribute? So we could have some in person and we could have some participating electronically.
Sure, but we're going to have, I think, by my count, 19 total votes on the governing board now, is that correct?
Let's see, the 5 governing board members would have 3 votes each, so there's 15. And then there will be,
Other voting members, I think.
we'll have the adult person voting, the children, adult voting, and the person in education voting. So, there would be 18 votes. The 2 providers do not get to vote.
Okay, so the person who uses mental health services, the person who, I see, gotcha. So we have 18. So it could be a situation where we have, 11 votes present, whether electronically or physically present at the meeting, and not have 2/3 of all the votes, but we would have 2/3 of all the physical members of the committee. And I'm just wondering which one governs. And I would make a suggestion that just be clarified. I don't think it matters one way or the other, but I think it should be clarified.
Yep, I can do that. I see where you're going. Yeah, we do need to get that clarified.
Couple of other things here. The, if a county, basically commits to voluntary withdrawal by failing to levy what is recommended in 5.0H on page 8. That levy process takes place obviously in the late winter, early spring, after the November 15th withdrawal deadline. Does that mean if a county fails to levy what is recommended and therefore commits a voluntary withdrawal, are they withdrawing at the end of that immediate fiscal year, or is it for the following fiscal year?
That is a good question. These are questions I need to bring up to the governing board. The failure to levy what is recommended, I think the board's intent was that the following, the upcoming next fiscal year, they would be leaving.
So if a county votes in, March 2021, not to levy the recommended amount, they'd be out in June 2021 or July 2021. Is the intent, you think?
Yeah,
That makes sense to me. I just think that should be clarified.
yeah, you're right. Yep.
And then just one more nitpicky thing. Just want to confirm with 5.3, the addition of additional member counties, that this provision would allow the addition of new member counties without unanimous approval of current member counties. Is that correct?
Let's see, you make the request to the governing board, and then it's referring back to the voting procedures in 5.2, and let's see,
majority of the member vote, well, that applies too. It seems to suggest that it doesn't have to be unanimous to add members.
Right, right. And maybe we need to clarify that when we're talking about adding a county to, the region. We could add that sentence in here, easy enough.
Is the intent then to require unanimity?
You know, that didn't come up in the discussion. I think the board was fine with approval of majority vote members.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Lori. This is Jeff. I think in our discussion, I don't think that was a concern if the majority would win, is what I thought.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else
Any other
have
questions?
questions or comments for Lori?
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
We still have, Nancy, we have discussion possible action on the, for the next, on this, under this item to approve the amended 28E. What do we want to do with that? And we're getting down, well, we have time if Lori's addresses those, but I don't know when the board would, or should we just move forward with this process with the clarifications on the issues?
You can do it either way, but obviously, ideally, we would wait and approve a finalized version.
Lori, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
What's your thoughts on, there were a couple of Nathan's comments that probably, when's our next governing board?
June 15th, next Monday.
Have you had other, feedback from boards, maybe as they've thought more and talked more about this, that might drive some clarifications in the 28E?
I have not. Tomorrow I meet with, or I present to the Jackson County board. I've already presented to the Scott County board, and then in 2 weeks I present, next week I present to Cedar, and then the following week it's to Clinton.
Okay, so we would need to probably, look at that draft. So they haven't, none of them have actually taken action on it, you've just presented.
Scott County did approve and have signed it.
Okay.
Jeff, you may want to give Ken Beck a call and let him know that there were some questions and need for clarification, because this may then require revise this document again and then take it back to all 5 counties.
Okay. Yeah, I'll call him today after our meeting.
Okay, good.
I mean, none of the changes are earth-shattering. I mean, I wonder if we couldn't make an approval and then with the amended clauses that we've already discussed.
But what if discussion with all 5 groups results in changes that you guys haven't discussed? That's my concern, would be that
She still has a few more counties.
there's certainly adequate time here to wait and see if we can't
Yeah,
get
we don't need to
a
have
finalized
this,
version before we move forward.
it isn't gonna stop us from moving forward, so I think it's best base would be to table this I'll have a conversation with Ken and we'll get these, couple of clarifications worked on, and get back to people to see what the other boards say about that, cause it'll be a full discussion as
It's
well.
just, yeah, to me, they're just giving more clarification
Right.
really in the, yeah.
And you don't know what the other counties may pop into their
They may
head.
have
Yeah,
questions too.
yep. Okay. So, anything further? We'll move on to item number, so we're gonna table that until, I get back on to the group on that. Okay, item number 5 is discussion regarding the FY 2021 shelter contract with Community Services Director of Disability Services Coordinator, Felicia Topper. Good morning, Felicia.
Good morning. I've been working on the performance-based contract for shelter services. In the past, we've block granted money, we've done quite a lot of different things. And in drafting that contract, I was having a discussion with Scott Dahlke, who is the director for MCSA. And one of the populations that is not covered underneath of that shelter agreement is those in the domestic violence shelter. And that is not funded in any way, shape, or form by the state. And it's a population that I really believe needs to be supported in terms of their homelessness. Now, in the agreement, there is a small amount of money that is a base. That will be 1/12, 1/12, 1/12, and that's capacity. Simple as that. It's about $27,000. And then $100,000 is for the daily rate for folks that are in the shelter. In that, we're anticipating that shelter numbers are going to be down because of COVID in general, until we get that issue resolved. And the contract does not and will not exceed the amount of money that was appropriated by this board. In which case, what I suggested to Scott was the possibility that we would fund the domestic violence shelter at the tier 4. And how the shelter is contracted in the new agreement is, in the first 30 days for first-time residents, that's when the rate, daily rate for staying there is the highest. And it steadily goes down the number of months that the folks are there. So if a person is there 4 months, one person, a single person, they're gonna get paid $10 a night to have them there. In the first month, they're gonna get about $17. So if a person comes back into that shelter, say they came in January and they come back in March, they go into a tier 2 rate, which is lower than the first rate. Because the aim of the game and the outcomes we want to achieve is to get those people permanently housed as best we can. And so that's where the incentive is. The other part of that contract is a case manager. And the case management services are funded on an outcome base as well. So the case manager, case management services, they have to do an assessment and they have to do a case plan, and that has to be done in a certain amount of time in the front end of that stay, so we can get that ball rolling quicker. Because as it is now, somebody can stay there 90 days and they may not do anything. But what we want to do is catch people when they're at their most vulnerable and most willing to change. And that's when they're in crisis. And so if we can get that process sped up a little bit, we're going to be in better shape. And the domestic violence shelter is a slightly different population. It is not an issue of trying to get them rehoused as quickly as possible. There's some work that gets done in there. There's some therapeutic work that gets done in there. And so they would be in that lowest tier 4 rate. So it would be by their stay at night, along with the folks that are in the homeless shelter.
So currently, how are they funded, the domestic shelter again?
Basically, it's a fundraising effort. Strictly a fundraising effort. There are no, Family Resources is the regional domestic violence shelter. They held the funding, and they do not give Muscatine County any money for that domestic violence shelter. So if that domestic violence shelter was not there, then that would mean that a woman and her children would have to go to Davenport, assuming there's an opening, would have to go to Davenport, pick the kids up, and they would be not in their home school, they would not be anywhere near their health home, and they would be in a strange place.
Do we have any statistics around how many individuals we would be helping per year in that shelter if we were to take
Scott
that
told
on?
me roughly it was about 80.
Oh, wow.
And what does code say? What are our obligations under code?
Under code, you don't have obligations to fund a shelter. You don't have obligations to fund that in any way, shape, or form. What you have to provide is funding for indigent folks. That's what code says.
Okay.
But this would not change the amount of the contract. It would only be
Yeah.
adding a population.
Yeah. Thoughts, comments? Me personally, I think that, you know, a domestic violence shelter is a needed resource in the community. And kind of troubling that we would relocate people already in trauma to a strange situation, so. I think that if we can do it within our means, then I think it makes some sense. So it's basically MCSA has partnered and done some, I don't think they house the domestic violence, do they house them in their shelter, or they
They
have
do
another,
not.
there's another
That is-
location in
That
town?
is a separate location altogether. And it would be a different situation in that we would have unique identifiers in terms of the building, not names. Because we wanna maintain that
Right.
anonymity.
And that facility is who owns, who manages, who owns that asset?
The
Do we know?
domestic violence shelter or the,
The domestic violence shelter,
I
like
believe that the building is owned by MWA.
Muscatine Welfare?
Yep, and there's no cost in terms of the building. What
Right.
the cost of the domestic violence shelter is in sheer operation, which means the personnel that are there doing the work that they need to do and whatever varying kinds of supplies, they do an awful lot of fundraising, and this would by no means fund 100%
And
of that
MWA
shelter.
is, we don't support them at all, that's all public or private fundraising efforts to provide, I mean, they do a
Right.
lot of great work around the community, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the pieces.
Jeff, this is Nathan. I think supporting this, especially given that it's not supported, is one of the most important things that we can do, and I'm fully in favor of it.
Yeah.
How many facilities are there? Is there just one?
One domestic violence facility, yes.
What about some of the outlying communities like Wilton and West Liberty and Atalissa, the smaller communities, how do they deal with that situation?
Those folks are usually brought here, but in domestic violence, in my experience, is there's an awful lot of use of safe homes. And so there may be volunteers who are willing to take folks in for a period of time until they can get into a safe environment. And safe homes are a pretty common practice, especially in rural areas.
Okay.
And a safe home is just a private individual
Yes,
that volunteers their home dwelling?
yes. And it's more comfortable, I mean, truly, it's more comfortable for victims in general. Staying in their own home place and staying with somebody who knows their situation and knows the town and that sort of thing. Safe homes are a great option.
Okay.
I'm in support of it.
So I think, you know, I think we've had this discussion, I think the board is on board with performance-based contracts and that whole process, and it sounds like we have a consensus that we think that this is a good idea to
Okay.
help with that domestic violence, and I don't know what else you're looking for us from today, is just.
I don't need anything else, I just wanted to get a feel for where you were at with adding that population to the contract. It doesn't change the, contract in any way, shape, or form, other than adding that population to it. So I don't need anything else.
Okay.
And I wanna thank you, Jim Carey, has been looking at that contract for me and giving me advice, and so it's been a great help. I'm gonna hit him up again, so.
Okay,
Felicia.
Thank you.
Felicia, while you're up, I do have a question in regards to, do we have any information in regards to MCSA's population change throughout this COVID? And I know that the court service is opening up within this next couple weeks. The evictions and the stays that are coming up, and I know, Jim, you may be able to talk about this when we come up, but we know that that's coming, and I believe that it's probably gonna hit within this next maybe 2 weeks, if not the next 3 weeks, as depending on how maybe judges make decisions. Do you have any feel or any ideas of what that's gonna impact for our shelter, or have you had any of those conversations with Scott?
Yeah, I have, and, in the next 2 weeks, there's money for paying back rent, back mortgages, that sort of thing. Where I'm gonna start to really worry is after July. We can refer people to a lot of different places to be able to get assistance. The state has money and there are various organizations that have money. But after July, it's all gonna be, I think, forgotten. And so, we have the challenge. Scott did, and his staff did an amazing job of getting people housed. Not just stuck in hotels, but actually housed. And so what we haven't had the opportunity to do is really do some serious work with those folks that we rapidly rehoused, and that they need some ongoing work. I mean, they really do. They need to have somebody stopping in and checking in on them and helping them develop some of those skills that they need to be able to manage that housing. For those folks that haven't had any income, we'll go about our work just exactly like we have before, which is if they come to the shelter, then we're gonna try to get them out and rapid rehoused as quickly as we can, and also help them with other kinds of resources and skill building. The United Way has brought together a large group of community agencies around COVID. And part of that discussion is, what do we need to do as a group in the community to help people stay housed, to help people maintain a working lifestyle that they can manage. And we've talked about basically universal intake system. We've also talked about shoes on the ground type of case management, where we have somebody coming in and out of that house and being able to help people stay on track. Because that's where things start to get a little awry, is when people start to get off track. Maybe they don't keep their job and then they fall back into old habits. So we're having those discussions now with the help of the United Way.
Have you been in communication and just saying, okay, and I'm just gonna say hypothetical, in June, we had, 80 evictions. In July, we have 160. There could be something to that effect that probably would be a good, metric to look at and say, hey, this time last year in June, we had only 25. That's probably gonna be a good indicator probably in regards to what we're doing here, because I think this is a unique situation that I don't think I can say anybody has ever gone through in regards to how we probably adjust to those things. But I think it would be something to probably have some foresight in looking at, because I think that center's probably gonna be impacted pretty dramatically in these next couple months, as you're mentioning. So
Absolutely.
I think it would be good if just give us an update probably in another month once we start seeing where those
Will
things
do.
are at. Thank you.
Anything else?
okay. Thank you,
Thank
Felicia. Okay, item number 6 on our agenda is item with County Attorney Jim Barry. Morning, Jim.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be standing here today, not just as the county attorney, but as a person. I appreciate the board, and I appreciate very much the people that I've had a chance to meet in this room and work with. People that have been very supportive and encouraging and helpful, and with the learning curve that I'm on, that's been a blessing. So I just wanted to start today by thanking everybody. I think it would be fair to say my management style may be a little different than what's been experienced in the past. That's not a good, bad thing. That's just me. I have very much involved the assistants in seeking their opinion and their input as to the direction of the office and caseloads and and things of that nature, which I believe has been well received. As the board's aware, from an office standpoint, we did lose one of the more senior assistants here just about a week ago. And she had, before I came on board, had applied for and received a job in Iowa City and took that job. And so we had a vacancy immediately to deal with. We did some interviewing, and this is on the agenda today. We have hired a lady by the name of Kelly Cunningham. Kelly used to live in Davenport. She has prior experience in both Iowa City and Davenport in the county attorney's offices. In fact, she's a very senior prosecutor, or career prosecutor would probably be a better statement. We've been fortunate enough, reached out to her, interviewed her to get her to accept the position, and she is planning on being on board July 1. Internally then, I'm moving one of the other assistants from their current caseload over to the juvenile caseload, which is where we had the vacancy. Everything else will stay the same with some minor case adjustments, and then my hope is that Kelly can come in and pick up that caseload for the other assistant pretty readily, and I think that should be able to happen. So in terms of staff and personnel, I think we have things fairly secure. And of course, I'm looking forward to November and beyond, and I think it's prudent to do that and make sure that from an assistant standpoint and a caseload standpoint, that it's incumbent upon my office to make sure that things are as stable and are able to continue forward. And so I'm looking at those decisions with that in mind, because I feel like I should be, for not only the office's benefit, but the board and the county as a whole. Otherwise, I do have a fairly frequent contact with Alan. I think that's been a good thing. There's a lot of history, a lot of things that have gone on that without the benefit of understanding the history, it's very hard for me to step in and understand what needs to be done, because if I don't know what's been done in the past, it makes it kind of difficult. So I want to commend the board for taking that step and having the foresight to see that would be a very great assistant to the office in general, and making sure that it could carry forward. Obviously, I've met all the staff. I've met a lot of people at the county. I still have a lot to go with the COVID thing and the busyness of daily activity, and whatever comes in the door, I've had my hands full, and that's okay. I will have and will continue to keep very regular office hours, and I will be in the office. Very much a hands-on type person. If you haven't dealt with me, you'll get to know that. I believe in a timely response. I think those things are all important. When somebody asks a question, they obviously need an answer, and I need to respond. That's not a comment about the past, just to help you understand who and what I am and what my expectation is. I place a high value on communication. Communication, frankly, is the key to all of this. And so we have to communicate not only as county employees, but the court and defense attorneys, and make sure that we are moving forward as efficiently as possible in dealing with the things that are the office's designated responsibilities. I've met with Nancy and staff on the budget. As you can see, there's no change in the county attorney's office. I have had occasion to meet with Bill, the architect, over maybe some changes that are scheduled to happen this next year in the office. I've made my suggestions in hopes that would improve that approach. I know they need to add a bathroom for handicap purposes. I've offered to take a portion of the office that I'm in for that purpose, hopefully to improve the plan. Again, not as a credit to myself, but as a way to make the layout and the procedure less impactful to the office. Because as all that gets going, we're going to be back up running in the court system, hopefully, and things are going to be busy because things have been delayed. Santos, to answer your question, if the forcible entering detainers have been suspended, I don't know what those numbers are in terms of what's been filed, that's been held back, and I certainly couldn't guesstimate as to what people haven't filed that they could file, but it is a priority of the court to get those matters heard, so we could have a good number. I will check with the clerk and see if she can give me an idea of what the current cases that are being suspended or held might be at this point, and then also, when it opens back up, to have her advise me again here what we would look at in the future in terms of new filings. But I would expect, like with most of this, we're gonna see some snowball, and I know we are in a criminal system. And I know we are, whether it's a jury trial or whether it's a non-jury trial. As far as the office is concerned as well, there's been some discussion with the court about doing non-jury trial type matters in magistrate's court, go-to. Obviously, that always requires the participation and the consent of the people that are involved. We've been using go-to very regularly, every day. And so I got with Bill at IT, and we have set up a station in our conference room so that if we have to take that step and things don't reopen as soon as we are hoping that they will, that we're able to bring in police and witnesses and victims to a designated point over which we have control, and we can usher people in and out. We can speak with them as prosecutors, and hopefully put that side, or our responsibility for that side of the system, in a good place. Rather than subpoena them to go to the courthouse, we're gonna subpoena to come to our office, and then be able to use the office and the personnel there to make sure everybody gets to talk, victims get coordination, and so forth. I can't speak for the other side of the equation, which of course is defense and defendants. I'm not sure how they're gonna handle that. We're gonna go ahead and take that step. Bill's already installed the computer, we've already used it once. On the off chance that this doesn't work, or even if we get back to the courthouse, there are limited matters that we could do. Again, trying to be proactive and be prepared to be ahead of whatever it is that we have coming down the road, which I'm not sure anybody can quantify at this point. Within the system, obviously, a lot of defendants aren't doing anything, they're not motivated to do anything, and so things are just sort of sitting. The court has gone to great lengths to set pretrials to try to stimulate discussions and get cases resolved with varying levels of success. I think as it stands now, my communications with the court has involved two different conversations. One with the greater district court in terms of the entire judicial district, and then in terms of the magistrates who have expressed a willingness to try to do non-jury trial cases now, go-to style. And I think the thought is that if we could get the courthouse open here, the board could get it open. The biggest hiccup with that is, under the Supreme Court supervisory order, for the court to be in session, the county has to comply with the guidelines the court establishes, and those guidelines have not yet been established. So we're hoping that those come out. I talked to Nancy and Sherry about that as well, but obviously we're gonna have to figure out a traffic flow, we're gonna have to figure out signage, and we're gonna have to figure out how to get people in and out and maintain as best we can. And all of that's gonna need to happen in conjunction with whatever those guidelines turn out to be. My guess is they're gonna be the standard things that we all talk about and we know about. I don't accept necessarily any more than that. But jury trials are gonna be a problem because when you bring in that number of people, we simply don't have the physical space to separate people appropriately. So there's gonna have to be, if those guidelines are in place, we're gonna have to make sure that we get that figured out. I know they've used some off-site locations in the past. I don't know how feasible that is, but there's a lot of work to do there. And I know on the one phone call I was on, there was expression to get the courthouse open, as soon as we can. But that's kind of where the court stands at this particular point in time. The supervisory order, as you can imagine, covers a lot of things. There's a lot of timelines and a lot of things associated with criminal prosecution that we have to be mindful of and that are delayed because of the order that's in place. So I wish I could stand here today and give you a good date to say this is when it's gonna be. I can't. I just encourage the board, I think, to be prepared, and we need to be thinking about what that plan looks like, taking into consideration what I think we can all expect to be the norm of things that are currently recommended.
So, Jim, on that point, then have those departments or the clerk and have they already started to take some steps towards the potentials of what you're thinking that maybe the new request may come in from the state?
I don't believe anybody has done much of anything. My discussions with Sherry and Nancy are, we're really curious what the court has to say. Although we could make a plan, we're then talking about potentially changing it or having discussions about who's gonna be responsible for what, you know, some of the things you already talked about here this morning. So
I guess if we had any ability to say, hey, well, you know, Polk County is already taking these steps and they're putting up these shields or whatever it may be, then we would have some sort of a potential guideline that we could be utilizing to open up the courthouse if we could already start getting those steps in place versus of saying, well, we've just found out and now we have a 3-week lag time in between there to try to get those services or safety precautionary places.
Judge Greaves reached out to Sherry and I, it's been several weeks now ago, a couple, 3, and asked our plans for opening the courthouse, and we made it clear to her, and it indicated that we only close the courthouse at the court's request, because we really have no staff or county business, so to speak, that goes on in there, and we view it as their discretion. And so I've kind of been waiting for word back, and I appreciate that she's speaking with you, Jim, and you're watching that, because, you know, if they would ask us, I think as long as you're communicating with Sherry and Nancy, they're gonna communicate with us if they ask us to put in any shielding or things like that. But, you know, I think that that's gonna get more and more difficult to get right now. It's in a shortage. What I'm hearing is a lot of people aren't gonna have anything till the end of July now. So it's gonna be a challenge, and the courts I'm sure they'll come up with something soon.
Yeah, I think the traffic flow we can consider, you know, how to get people in and out just physically. The signage, I think we can consider, and, you know, some of the normal protections that are in place, you know, with social distancing and masks as the case may be, and sanitizer, you know, but beyond that, I'm not sure what they're gonna do, or what they're gonna recommend. You know, all I can tell you from the one phone call I was on is that there's quite a variety of people in terms of thought as to what needs to happen. And right now, you know, things were supposed to start back up mid-July. Now we're talking mid-September, and I'm not gonna tell you that wouldn't change again. I'm not saying it will, but I can't say that it won't. And so, you know, it's an onion with many layers.
Yep.
And when you start peeling them back and you start asking for insight and opinion, there are people that have a lot of opinion and insight. It doesn't mean it's good or bad, it just means it's opinion and it has to be considered. And people have been doing that, as you experience daily, I'm sure. So, I think, other than that, I don't have anything else specific. I just, again, wanted to come over and introduce myself. I haven't met necessarily everybody in person. I've met a few of the board members, and again, express my gratitude for the opportunity, and express that I will be dedicated to doing what needs to be done and to communicating and to making sure that we go forward the best way we can, and at least with a full and fair understanding and an opportunity to make what I would hope would be the best decisions. Any questions?
Very good.
Jim, just one question, on the handicap building or handicapped bathroom that we're putting in over there, have we fixed the electrical issues that we had over there?
No.
Power outage
we have
a while
not.
back?
No, I think Santos is, we've identified the county, we have facade issues, we have other issues. I know there were some concerns around access and office access, and so we've kind of, I think Mike Nolan is working on that project, and that's part of our capital plan is to try
To do that when they do this bathroom?
we're gonna look at, well, that bathroom would be a part of the whole picture. We decided, because we had,
Okay.
you know, we were kind of facing on, you know, let's do some access, and then we got issues on the facade, and I think at one, we just said, let's step back here and look at all the issues in that facility. Let's create a plan, let's put it into our capital project and get it all done at once. And I think that's kind of, and I don't know, Nancy, if we had, Sherry probably better, what year we had that. It's,
I think some of it was planned for this fiscal year, obviously that's not gonna happen. But the funding's in next fiscal year. And, like, you have talked to Mike Nolan?
Yeah, we met last Friday after lunch.
Perfect, good.
When he was here in town anyway, and, we went through, you know, there's a roof, there's the bathroom, there's the facade, there's the electrical. And all I did was explain what I see as or what I hear are the current problems with the office in terms of electrical and connection, because the go-to meeting thing, if we don't have a solid connection for the laptops, we can drop off the meeting, which
Yeah.
obviously doesn't do very well. So Bill has taken care of all of that very expeditiously. The bathroom was just, you know, was supposed to go out into the secretarial area. I've suggested a different approach that I just think is a better approach for the building and in general, and certainly not space that I would need.
and he's addressing the physical security as well, because at one point Alan had talked about, like with the, and I know we did something in there, but
Right, well, there's been discussion about changing the front entryway, because right now, when you come into the county attorney's office, you can just walk right in and walk to any area, so there was discussion about a wall and an access door there.
And we've discussed that, a door, so you have to be let in, and then a window that would allow somebody behind the glass to conduct business with the public that walked in the door, and eliminate some of that concern about the protection over the whole pandemic thing.
Right.
So we discussed those things as well, and, you know, and discussed the importance of coordinating the timing of that so that we didn't put ourselves where we're shut down in the office or we're moving people around in the midst of the other problems that we all anticipated are gonna be coming. So he hadn't drawn up any plans. This meeting, I think now he will start to get something that is more concrete, put together, and then for everybody to consider. But I've jumped in and at least made that recommendation because I think it'll be helpful to the process.
yeah, and it's a little unfair to you too. You haven't had an opportunity to view the office working normal times much yet, and you'll get more opinions, I'm sure. And we've had Mike pretty busy on other thing. We got roofs in the jail, and we've got the sheriff's quarters, but those projects are kind of going to the next phase, so his design work should be able to.
I was just asking about the electrical. I knew about a year ago, I went in there and everything was shut down and I didn't even know, and they said, oh yeah, we lost. And so then I was just, having that experience, was just wanting to know if we're doing
Yeah,
any
it's
electrical
been-
or any expansion of pulling walls open. Those are things that I wanted to follow up on.
And those are some of the concerns the assistants have expressed, which is why I asked. Because obviously there's history there that I'm not familiar with, but again, things have been very well received and addressed, and I don't anticipate any difficulties working through those items.
Good.
Well, we appreciate your work and thank you so much, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
You want me to sit around, or?
You're welcome to, you don't need to.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 7, discussion possible action to approve resolution 0608-2004, recognizing the naming and platting of a private shared drive in Muscatine County with Planning and Zoning Administrator Eric Furness. Good morning, Eric.
Morning. Approximately a year ago, we were approached by a property owner who had recently taken possession of a plot of land along Highway 22 East in the 2800 block. It's getting close to Pawn Geneva plant there, just for your understanding. They bought a plot of land, began talking about building a house, and first thing we look at is assigning an address. It was not a platted subdivision lot. It was previously zoned residential. Through looking at that, we determined there was no logical addresses left in this stretch of road. most of the housing along the area is older, has been allowed to happen outside of guidance of proper subdividing, that type of thing, years and years ago. So from time to time this happens, and we will have to unfortunately change people's addresses to make things fit in the sequence and make sense for E911. So I started looking at what that address really should be and found that it was a house that was clear back over the bluff. Went and talked to those folks. I try to do that in personal visits. No one likes to just have the government say, your address, we're gonna change it. It creates that. They had a very nice house with their address carved in stone on the front, so they were even less thrilled about the idea. We started looking at the houses back there. In the memo I provided you, none of which are visible from Highway 22. It looks like a residential subdivision. There's 6 houses back there that all have Highway 22 East addresses, none of which are visible from the highway. A cluster of 911 signs down at the highway that provide really no guidance for delivery or emergency services trying to locate. Talked to a couple of the neighbors. They all expressed stories, shared stories of some of those difficulties in the past. And so we started looking at what could be done. I talked to the county attorney, Alan Ostergen, ran an idea by him. This is not a platted subdivision. The houses have been built over different time periods, all given 911 addresses for Highway 22. It doesn't make a lot of sense. What could we do to name this road, the shared paved drive that they all share to get back to those houses? Came up with the concept, the board of just approving a resolution. I coordinated a neighborhood meeting with the 6 property owners back there to kind of discuss the dilemma. They were all very supportive of giving their shared private drive just like a subdivision road name. They had a meeting after I left. It very quickly came up with a road name they agreed upon. I did need to get written consent of all the property owners to sign off. Shortly after the neighborhood meeting, one of them left town and was out of the country for an extended period of time. So I finally obtained the last signature from all the property owners indicating their consent. So what we got before you this morning is a resolution where we would name their private drive, just like a subdivision road. This would free up at least 6 addresses right away for any additional development, because instead of those being Highway 22, they will be called Thunder Ridge. The numbers will stay the same, but then we could use those numbers for Highway 22 numbers down along the highway. It will be just like a private subdivision road. It's not maintained by the county. It will be maintained just as it is now by the property owners. I think in addition to freeing up the addresses, I hope you see the value in better helping delivery services and probably more importantly emergency services in locating these houses. We'll relocate the 911 signs to the end of each individual driveway, so there'll be a clear street sign at the highway that says Thunder Ridge. And then as emergency services or delivery vehicles go up the hill, they'll be able to see the individual 911 signs at the individual driveways. So was your map clear enough? I did print off some color copies. I know sometimes when it gets sent to you, if anybody needs them on where this area is, or
I'm still trying to figure out where exactly it's at.
Isn't that road that went from Doc Blackwoods up there?
it's near Blackwoods, but it's not. It's not. It's about 1/4 mile back west from Han Geneva.
Yeah.
But it's right after Blackwoods, I believe.
Yeah, I know
I
exactly.
know where it is.
Yeah.
So was
So
the,
right after Solomon, there's kind of an empty plot of land. That's the one that
And
needs an address. And then these are all the
there
individual
was
houses
for
that
sale.
are on the GIS map. But this is the empty plot that needs an address that actually,
Maybe
this was the one that needs one?
yeah.
This one.
And the address that would be used is clear back here.
mentioned that road was.
So these
This
are
right
all share this long
And this is where the
lane.
guys, where they're
Wants
building
to
the
build
new.
a house that needs an address that we don't have any available.
Saw this part, I
I
didn't
see.
realize. It goes, yeah, I didn't realize it went back to those.
So we felt this was the most streamlined and best process to alleviate these issues. It doesn't happen very often, but it does highlight kind of the impact of poor long-term planning or you know, the reason why we have subdivision processes that require private road names. It catches up with you eventually when there's not a lot of thought into long-term effects of, you know, development in kind of a haphazard way, so.
How old are these houses that we've did that,
Some
do
of
you
these
know?
go back to the early 70s or maybe even before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, probably before we had adopted zoning
Right,
and
certainly before
building codes.
comprehensive subdivision ordinance.
That one way up there is like, wow, that's maintaining just for that one house that's way up on top of the hill.
Yeah.
Almost
And
closer to
this,
getting
you know,
into rolling meadows. up in
And
there.
this would, should there be any additional subdividing of those properties, which could occur, there's already a road that's named that, and we can use additional numbers off of the road Thunder Ridge.
So that's the new name that they voted.
That's what they voted on, agreed upon, and, like in my
Thunder
memo, I
Ridge.
talked to Keith, normal procedure is for the county to provide, the street sign at the intersection with the county road. We don't provide the interior subdivision street signs, but the one that meets our county roads, we do provide. In this case, it's a state road, but Keith thought it was appropriate, he's gonna get the sign ordered. We are gonna move to a different, color and, letter for county subdivisions, going forward. Right now, we've allowed them to order their own signs that look just like county road signs. Across the state, most counties require subdivisions to have a slightly different sign that's identifiable, that makes it stick out as a private lane. So we think we're gonna do that moving forward with new subdivisions. It'll look very similar to a county street sign, but it'll possibly be a different color, letter, and background. So.
The numbers will be the same, just it'll be Thunder Ridge.
Right.
Same.
So upon your passage of this resolution, we'll let the homeowners know that in 30 days, we will notify the post office, and we have a group email anytime we assign a new address that goes to our GIS, our auditors, our assessors, that an address has been changed, so everybody gets the same information, it gets put in the Muscatine system. That'll all happen in about 30 days, so this will give the residents their time to start making those changes with their billings, that type of thing. And then and it may depend on how long it takes to get the street sign too, but we won't do it until we've got everything in place, but this is the first step to do that.
Okay.
What about the pizza delivery guys?
Should help, yeah.
Yeah,
Any more
Santos
with
way to
that?
worry about. Amen. Good.
Just wanted to
Okay.
make sure.
So, any
I'll make a
further-
motion to
I have a
approve.
motion by Santos
I'll second.
and a second by Scott. Nancy, should this be a roll call vote?
Yes, it should.
Okay, this should be a roll call vote. Any further discussion? Santos, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric, for all the follow-up on that.
Item number 8 is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the June 1st, 2020 regular meeting. A motion by Scott,
Second.
second by Doug. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Next item on the agenda is correspondence. Santos, did you have any correspondence?
Yes, I did. I had, one, I had gotten 2 calls in regards to when we're opening up, and I talked to Leslie in regards to this, and who do we call, who do the residents call when we start opening up? And do they just contact those numbers? And are the scheduling for those meetings 15 minutes apart, half an hour? Obviously, I would assume it'd be by department, but it was just a question about that, because up in the Quad Cities, they're opening up and they're just allowing one person at a time, and the lines are outside. My main calls were on the treasurer's calls for being able to renew license plates and registrations for vehicles.
I can tell you that Christy Roby Williams, who's on the line, is going to talk to you in a little bit, but she's also reached out and offered some help, so I'm going to set something up hopefully tomorrow and invite some of the department heads in this building to participate and just have a discussion with her about best practices, so
Yeah.
we can kind of figure out what
And
makes
again,
sense
that-
and what works.
that question about when they said they were just allowing the lines outside was just so they could continue to either get the overload of what they had in the Quad Cities, but it was just a question brought to me asking, how are we administrating that and how do we plan on doing that? So I wanted to just share with you on that. So I had that, and then I had the email that I forwarded to the team with the We Lead new representative and the new We Lead director that we're pretty excited about having and starting early next month. And then I had a call from a county resident on Tuesday in regards to compost site and when can they start allowing county residents being able to come into the city to be able to drop off grass and whatnot. And I contacted Dave Pop from the city in regards to this because they've opened up, but they have not allowed county residents to drop off anything yet. And what his communication was to me was that they will be opening it up to the county once the city fully opens, and they are just doing basically a partial opening from the city right now. So I would anticipate it maybe a month, maybe a month and a half. I don't know really yet. When they opened up, I didn't follow on their last Thursday meeting. I know that they just had something in regards to that. So those were the correspondences that I had.
Okay. Nathan, did you have any correspondence?
I did not.
Okay. Scott?
I had none.
Doug?
I had some calls on cancellation of the fair with concerns and a lot of questions about the ag shows, 4-H and FFA. We did sell a lot of season tickets so far, so if people do want refunded, they can get their refund on those. And a lot of the people have said that they're just gonna make that as a donation to the fair, and that's very much appreciated. And we will be racing Sunday night at the fairgrounds. We're doing the MLRA late model race, so I'm hoping that's a success. The 20th and the 21st of June, the following weekend, we are horse racing.
Horse racing.
Yes. The horse and buggy.
Oh, wow. Is that the first
Yes,
time
we
they've
are.
done that, or have they done that?
Yes,
They did that last
in
year.
a long, long time, that'll be a first. And then there'll be more races to follow, and some of the events that had been scheduled for the fair, not the concert, but some of the other events we're gonna do on weekends that were
Do they
not
ever
racing.
videotape that, or do they ever share that somehow on some other, like
I don't
public
think so.
access or anything from?
I don't think so, Santos, but that's a good idea.
That would be cool to watch.
Yeah, it
I
would.
mean, something local as far as what we do here and.
Fork out a 20 and go watch it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm talking.
That's what we want.
Moving on.
Okay.
That's it on course.
That's it. I did have correspondence. I had one email on cancellation of the fair. Committee reports. Doug?
None.
Scott?
I had none as well.
Nathan?
No, the Muscatine County Health Association was canceled again this month.
Okay. Santos?
We were gonna have the solid waste. We moved it to next month.
Okay. And I had no committee reports. Okay, items with the administration office. Item 11A, discussion possible action authorizing the chair to execute a contract with Cost Advisory Services, Inc. for cost allocation services for FY 1920, 21, 1920, 2021, 21, and 22. It looks like a 3-year contract.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And this is just a renewal. We've used this company for a number of years. They are not raising their costs at all. They're recognizing that counties have had some fiscal impact from with COVID measures, so they're offering another 3 years at the $6,100 a year.
We're not going back to 1920, are we?
No. Unless you wanted to. Maybe with the races, I don't know, it could be something with you and Santos, buggies, 1920, okay. And just for everybody's memory here, the cost allocation services, they're reviewing the charges and chargebacks, and this is what the state reimburses us for services we provide to DHS, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion by Scott,
I'll second.
second by Doug. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next item is review and possible action to adopt a public records and information policy. You all should have had a copy from Nancy.
And actually, it was Jim Berry who initially did the initial draft on this. Sent it to, Alan and I, we reviewed it and recommended some minor changes to it. And now it's here before you. It's very
Yeah.
similar to Scott County's.
Yeah, so I don't know if I had mentioned to people, as you know, we've had a number of requests, and they seem to be difficult to deal with at times. So I reached out to Scott County to see what their policy might be, because they tend to have a few more of the administrative policies, and they shared that, Mahesh shared that with me, I shared it with Nancy, and she and the group looked at that and put together. There are certainly a lot of exceptions written in Iowa code, and I think some of the conversations with Jim is you really don't want to list those exceptions because you let the code drive it. And this just tells what our process will be. So hopefully everybody had a chance to review that. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Looks good.
Nathan?
I did not have any, it was fairly straightforward and makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So if there are no further comments, I would accept a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion by Nathan. I have a second by Doug. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carries. Okay, items with the administration office, other,
I don't have anything else for you guys.
nothing else? This next is receive information from county employees. I think Nancy said that Christy Roby Williams was on the line. If, maybe we give Christy the floor at this point, is that okay with you, Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Christy, are you on with us?
I am on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Great. Just wanted to provide some updates. Hopefully you are following along on coronavirus.iowa.gov and looking at the dashboards. If you're not quite sure on how to navigate those dashboards, our team members have done a tutorial on how to navigate that you can find that on our Facebook page. It's done in both English and in Spanish. Currently, we have a total of 566 positive cases. We actively have approximately 29 of those 566 cases that we are open, active, and we are following, doing disease investigation and monitoring on. 463 people have recovered. That's 82% of folks that have recovered. 41 deaths. We've had a steady, no additional deaths over the last week and a half, so that is definitely a huge blessing and gift. You will see that the long-term care facilities, we had 3 long-term care facilities that were considered outbreak status. 2 of them have been released from that outbreak status, and that's Wilson Retirement Community and Lutheran Living Senior Campus. So a huge shout out to those facilities for their diligence in kicking COVID out of their facilities. Pearl Valley continues to be at outbreak status. They have, as of today, 63 recovered out of 81 positive, both staff and residents. I'd like to encourage folks to obviously get tested by a primary care provider. If you have one, if you're having symptoms, you're not feeling well, call your primary health care provider, let them know, and seek that testing. You can also go to testiowa.com and complete that assessment. It's both in English and in Spanish. Once you complete the assessment, if you qualify, there's testing still in Scott County until the end of this week, and that's from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I know a couple people that have gone through that process, and it was pretty smooth and simple, and they knew their results within 24 hours. Any questions for me?
So you're recommending get tested, is it even if you're feeling good?
Testing would be if you have symptomatic. So once you complete the assessment, it will let you know if you qualify for testing or not. So you may have been exposed, you may be in a certain field that it's going to recommend based on the algorithm that's behind the scenes with the Test Iowa. If you are symptomatic, contact your primary care provider, because really they're going to be able to offer you the best care. I am not recommending you go get tested just because.
Okay.
But we do know that when we can test in public health, we can test for communicable diseases. When folks are symptomatic and or to manage it in an outbreak status, yes, it is ideal in that specific situation. So you'll see 2 meatpacking plants that have been impacted, residents from our county have done on-site testing of all employees to manage the outbreaks within those facilities. Same things with long-term care facilities.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for,
Christie, Nathan here, do you know or can you give us numbers as to how many of the deaths that we've suffered have been connected with long-term care facilities in those 3 outbreaks, and how many were independent of those? Do we know that?
Approximately 91% of the deaths were related to individuals who resided at long-term care facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
okay, any other questions for Christie? Thank you, Christie.
Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome. As Nancy said, offered to meet with Nancy to walk through looking at your plans of reopening. I will say, on behalf of Public Health and the Board of Health, and I've talked to Bill Colner about this, is that as folks are seeking input and advice from me, I'm always going to give the advice on the side of public health, and that's prevention and precautionary measures. When you look at our data and the number of people affected, you look at the number of deaths in our county, you look at our health needs assessment from 2018, you put all the data in front of you. We have a lot of high-risk populations in our county. So it is my continued recommendation that you proceed, that folks within our county proceed with all precautionary measures that you can knowingly put into place. When you bring large crowds of people together, coronavirus is still out there. COVID's waiting to jump on its toes. We have just gone through a lot of turmoil in our county and experienced a lot of loss and impact from all ages of individuals. So I just recommend for the county moving forward, as does the Board of Health, is to proceed with all of the known precautionary measures we know to be factual, actual, and to, they work. They work in healthcare. We know that they are effective.
Okay,
Christy, one last question. Can you say how many days have the numbers gone down in a row? For example, of positive cases. Have we gone 2 weeks with numbers going down, currently, or have we gone a week down?
If you get on that, and if you did screen share, I could show you what our actual dashboard looks like. It's been since.
it's on their website, you just put Muscatine County, it'll give you the cases.
Get it
I would
publicly if
say
we have
about May 13th that we've seen lower numbers each day consistently.
Okay. Perfect.
Yep,
Thank you.
Did you want me to do?
No, I can't really
Okay.
see it. I'm not on since we're in
Okay.
the office, we can't really see that. I just wanted to just verify that with you. I had somebody ask me that question, and I know that we'd had some of that information available.
Thank you, Christie.
Thank you.
You're very
Okay.
welcome.
Brian, did you have something for the board this morning?
Yeah, I'm just gonna give you a update of the events tomorrow. We got a weather-related event coming in. It's from the National Weather Service. Periods of heavy rain are likely on Tuesday as tropical moisture enters into the area. Localized flash flooding is possible. Tomorrow, a flash flood watch has been issued for Tuesday. Hourly rain rates up to 2 inches are possible in the heaviest bands. Just as a reminder, never drive into flood waters, turn around, don't drown. An interesting fact, only 2 other post-tropical low-pressure systems have tracked through any portion of Iowa since 1886, making this a potentially very rare event. So just keep an eye on the system that's coming through tomorrow. Again, I will have a webinar this afternoon with National Weather Service, get a little more information. You know, it all depends how it tracks. I see some of the areas west of it will have potential to get a lot more rain. We're looking maybe 1.5, 2 inches, but we don't know until it arrives tomorrow. So it's something to let everybody know about. That's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Brian. Okay, any other county employees? Next item on the agenda is to receive comments from the public. Bill, do we have anybody indicating? I've had no one.
One caller.
So we still,
Unmuted them.
Hi, this is Shelley Cervidillo Elias.
hi Shelley, good morning. Did you have,
I just wanted to thank everybody and say that I was here to just listen and learn and just ask that I saw that Cedar Rapids, the police had a new policy requiring that their police have to report any violence that they saw. And I would like for the Muscatine County to please consider doing that.
So what was that again? To report what for violence? Shelley, this is Santos. Can you repeat what that comment was?
Sure. I guess I'm supposed to say my address and everything too, aren't I? So Michelle Cervidillo Elias, 609 West 3rd Street. So in Cedar Rapids, the police chief came out and he's instituting a new policy where he's requiring his police, if they see any officers committing an act of excessive force, he's requiring his police that they have to stop it, but they also have to report it. And so I know that we already have policies that ban the use of excessive force, and we already ban the chokehold. But I would like for us to also consider taking it to that next level, and I would like for us to please maybe put that on the agenda and consider talking about that and consider adding that to our policy.
okay, thank you. That brings up I failed to mention, Leslie, I did receive one email from a county resident, and it's probably would be something maybe Nancy, we could reach out to the sheriff, asking about body cameras. You know, we had a conversation in 2016, body cameras were not in use. We were looking at the policy, and I know we have a few, we talked about it, and it was kind of delayed. Maybe that's something we could ask the sheriff to give us a little update on that, and maybe we have the, we can bring this same comment up to them and have that discussion.
I know in the city we
Well,
just
we have
did
a
that.
$38,000 grant for seatbelt checks, but I mean, yeah, let's get body cam.
I know in the city we just approved those 2000.
Yeah, Brett talking tonight
18 or
reached out
19,
to
I
the chief,
remember.
and he said they wear body cams. So.
Well, they just got them, and I know that that was something that was a budget increase that we had added on.
Yeah.
And they were looking at these newer models because, you know, that kind of technology is, you know, you can buy it 1 year and 2 years from now it's obsolete. So I would think it would be something that we'd want to make sure that we
And I
probably
remember
contact
from,
them
I looked at,
those.
you know, this resident actually shared with the meeting minutes from that, and, you know, it kind of slipped my mind. In 2016, the sheriff had indicated, you know, they were interested, they were looking at it, they'd purchased a couple, they were experimenting with them. Obviously, there's lots of issues around personal privacy and access and storage and all kinds of stuff. But, it might be just good
And
to
the
reach out to
city-
him and ask him for
yeah.
an update.
Yeah, on the city, it was really good because it helps in case prosecution. It was really a good positive
Yeah.
thing. They felt like it was an added value, but I do remember it being more than the 38,000. So I think that would be something just to probably, when you start looking at how many police officers that they were covering for
It's
in regards
cost prohibitive, plus we would probably have to add storage.
Yeah, you'd have to
for
put
all
it,
those videos, because without comprehensive policy,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to store those videos for any length of time. They're gonna have to be reviewed or rules set up so that they automatically fall off, so.
I know that would be, again,
Right.
when we talked about it, it was almost 2 years of planning prior to purchasing that software plus that actual equipment, because equipment is cheap. It's the software and everything else that goes.
body
along with that.
cameras aren't the big expense,
it's the actual-
it's the storage and what do you do with the data when you
And
have it,
how
and how
much do
long do
they
you keep
want,
it,
so-
and what do you
I'm
do
not
with
really
it?
sure how expensive the body cameras are. I don't
So then we
think
have to
that
ask
they're
for a
necessarily-
grant, we have to write a grant.
Well, they're good comments, Shelley. I think that we definitely, we can reach out to the sheriff and we can have those conversations, and I think it would be a good discussion, and I think that, you know, for future wise, as far as the county, I think it's a good investment, but I think we'd have
But what
to,
I asked for had nothing to do with the body cams, gentlemen. What I asked about was policy where we asked for reporting if someone, if a sheriff in their duty, if they're using excessive force, one, someone else, another police officer stops it, and two, they then report it. So what I asked for wasn't the body cams, which I appreciate that was the correspondence that was received. But
correct, and that's what I was
I'm asking
commenting
for
on.
is beyond that.
Yep.
But thank you.
Yep.
Well, this is Nathan, and what I would say is the how and the policy of law enforcement is for better or worse not in the board's hands at all. It's entirely within the process of the sheriff. And so this is a request that we can't really do anything about. You'd be better off directing it to the sheriff.
I appreciate that, but when it comes down to it, when you set written HR policy at the county level, the buck stops with the supervisors. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are not the supervisors of the sheriff's department.
Okay,
Thank
that's good enough. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thanks everyone for their time. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.